Hello, this is Gavin for PokerSwat.com. I'm playing as Gavs101 on PokerStars. I'm going to be making a mid-stakes PLO series of videos, trying to explain some concepts which I think are useful, and hopefully try and either get you winning at whatever level you're playing, or maybe helping you to make those adjustments so you can start to move up levels. So the things I'm going to be looking at, the top key concept is adjusting your pre-flop play based on the table conditions. So at lower stakes, I think you can get away with raising a much wider range of hands because people just don't play back at you at these stakes. And I think that a lot of the people that do play back at you actually don't play back at you well and will misplay their hands after the flop, and make big post-flop errors. So you really want to be building lots of big pots. You don't mind playing lots of hands. You're not going to be exploited at this level because the regulars basically just aren't good enough to exploit you. So you can get away with a much looser style, I think, at lower stakes, and that's the sort of style that I play anyway. I always have played a looser style, a more laggy style. So that's the sort of style I'm going to be preaching in my videos. I think it's important to develop your own style and not to try and copy or emulate anyone's style exactly, but to maybe just look at the way that I'm doing things, see if you can implement some of that into your game, see if you can make your own game, but just apply some of the concepts which I'm going to be talking about in, and hopefully make some improvements, plug some leaks. So we're going to be looking at how to adjust post-flop to aggressive opponents, which becomes more important as you're going to be moving up. People tend to play more aggressively at the higher stakes, and you need to be able to know how to exploit this, because generally it will be exploitable. You're looking to increase your non-showdown winnings. It's a subject that comes up a lot on the 2+2 forums. People with big samples of hands with just huge non-showdown losses, and although they're winning a load of showdown, they're just not stealing enough pots to make them profitable players. And so we're going to look for spots where we really should be making steals, looking for spots where we can represent hands credibly. We're looking for spots where we can make cheap little stabs at the pot, and we also need to be then merging our range against players who we're going to be playing against regularly, so that we're not just making these little stabs at the pot with nothing. We want to be making these little stabs with made hands as well, so that we can't be exploited. A thing I think all poker players struggle with at some point is emotional control and discipline, and I think it's something I definitely struggle with a lot. I think that PLO really is a game where people go on tilt a lot more aggressively than Hold'em. And I think there are players who play online who are quite talented that will never be winning players because they can't get their tilt problems under control. And there are certainly regulars who I play with who are very talented players, but just seem to spew off stacks when they take a beat. And it's something that you need to get under control. You need to be able to quit when you're not making the right decisions. And you also, something that I struggled with was trying to play too many tables. So I wanted to just log lots of hands. I wanted to, just try and basically make as much as possible. But I was going about it the wrong way by just adding more and more tables. As I was getting bored with the game, I was playing too long, playing really long sessions, and just keeping on adding tables. And I think it was really detrimental to my game. And I've moved down from 12 tables to 9 tables, and then down to 6 tables. And I've actually been having sessions with 4 tables, and I think that 4 tables is probably optimum for me at the moment. I think there are definitely things that I do when I'm playing 4 tables that I would miss when playing 6 tables. But I haven't decided what's going to optimize my win rate yet. But it's something that you need to come to the decision to yourself. But you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to cut your tables right down, even if you have to cut it down to just 1 table, and just see how much more information you're getting, and how much better you're playing when you're just focusing on 1 table. And I think you will surprise yourself. Okay, so moving on, we're going to be looking at how to look for good spots for continuation bets, where we're going to be sandwiching players. I'll go into that in more detail, but looking for spots where you're basically sandwiching an opponent between a continuation bet and someone who's already checked, and they don't know if they're looking to check raise the pre-flop raiser, which means that they're going to need a much stronger hand to continue. And spots like that are going to be very good for continuation bets, because it's going to improve your frequency of success. So we're going to be looking at double and triple barrels. So that's betting flop and turn to take it down, or flop, turn and river to take it down when we've got air, or even when we've got a big draw. But we need to be looking at what boards are bad for doing this as well, and I'll go into that in more detail. We'll certainly have some spots where we're going to be floating in position, so that's calling with a sort of marginal hand, hoping to take it away on a later street. Against more aggressive regulars, we're going to be making small bets to try and induce bluff raises. We're going to be looking at bluff raises ourselves, and we're also going to you're going to hear me talk a lot about pot control, and it's something that becomes much more important against aggressive players, against players who you're unsure of their raising range. So people you haven't played with a lot, you just want to pot control until you get to know how they're playing. Yeah, I'll try and talk about lots of these things. So I use Hold'em Manager for my sessions. I've got a HUD, and the stats that I use most that I have on my HUD are VPIP, which is the number of hands they're playing, or more correctly, the percentage of hands that they're playing before the flop. Then the next figure is the pre-flop raise percentage, and the next figure is their 3-bet percentage, and the next figure, which I can show you on Morris SCH's, is the 4-bet percentage. And that all becomes very important when we look at how light we're going to be 3-betting for value and how light we're going to be 4-betting for value, because it will change based on the opponent and the conditions. And if you're only 4-betting aces in aggressive games, then you're doing something wrong, basically. The line below, we've got continuation bet percentage, and the next figure is fold to continuation bet percentage, which is important when we look at whether people are going to be floating us. The level below, the first 3 figures are flop aggression percentage, turn aggression percentage, and river aggression percentage. A figure around about 20% would it's likely that someone with a figure of around about 20% is only going to be betting strong made hands, strong semi-bluff draws, and they're basically going to have the goods a good percentage of the time when the figure is around about 20%. When it gets to around about the 40% mark, you basically have to know that the player is going to be full of shit a lot of the time. So I mean, a lot of players will have a high aggression percentage on the flop because a good proportion of their flop bets will be just continuation bets. So these figures sort of go hand in hand. As you can see, Morris 71% continuation bet, so he's got a high continuation bet percentage anyway. But one of the best things about Hold'em Manager is that you can bring up the whole range of stats by just clicking on the plain black bit of this box here, and it will bring up their 3-bet percentage from every position on the table. So sometimes their 3-bet percentage can be misleading because you'll get a lot of players who will 3-bet a lot in position, but when they 3-bet out of the blinds, they're only 3-betting good aces, good kings. So it can be misleading just having the 3-bet percentage from all areas of the table, and that's when clicking this box and getting the whole range of stats up can be useful when making a decision, because it can swing it one way to the other. The other really important stat is the percentage that the player bets versus a missed continuation bet, because that means that you can set up a lot of check raises with air, you can set up a lot of check raises with strong semi-bluffs, you can set up a lot of check raises with strong made hands in situations where you know that they're going to bet the flop a lot of the time, when just because you've checked the flop as the pre-flop raiser. Looking around the table, I can see Morris. I've played quite a lot of hands with him. He plays a lot higher stakes actually as well, and he's kind of on the laggy side. I have seen him spew in a few spots, I think, but generally he's a good player, and he's going to be adjusting well to my aggression. So it's good that we have position on him here, and bad that he has position on us here, because if we are raising a lot of hands, he's going to be 3-betting a lot of hands in position. For value, a lot of non-ace hands, and he's going to be basically making our life a bit difficult. He's going to be playing back at us. He's not going to be giving us too much respect. So yeah, we have to be a little bit careful of Morris. Scuba Joe, I've played quite a few hands with him. Very, very loose. Kind of bad, I think. I don't think anyone can really get away with playing 69% of their hands at these sorts of stakes and regularly be a winning player. But I have actually seen him build up some massive stacks, as I think a lot of the players do tend to respond badly to this sort of aggressive style and overcompensate and play right into his hands by trying to combat his aggression with more aggression, which usually just ends in badness. But yeah, so it's good we have position on him. We're going to be looking to exploit him. We're going to be looking to exploit WGAF, not me. He's also playing around about 70% of his hands. Bruce 18 Lee, very taggy regular. He also plays higher. He's typical of the sort of regular that you get at these stakes, who he has a very strong range for betting. He's only going to be playing strong hands. He's probably playing a lot of tables. He's probably not concentrating too much. He's not likely to be playing back at us. He's likely to be bet folding as a continuation bet a lot. So we're going to be looking to exploit him as well. The first hand I wanted to talk about was, if I name the tables as well, with top left being table 1, top right being table 2, bottom left table 3, bottom right table 4. So up on table 2, we've got 4, 5, 6, 8 double suited in the small blind. It's a fairly strong hand, really. Everyone's got a deep stack here, so this is the kind of hand that I like to raise out of the small blind. People give you a lot of credit when you raise out of the small blind, and so you can rep a lot of hands on the flop, take down a lot of ace-high flops. So it's the kind of hand that I'd like to mix up my play with and raise out of the blind sometimes, especially as I did try and play quite a laggy style in this video, because I wanted to show you how you can get away with it more at these stakes, as less of the regulars are going to be exploiting you. So we flop an 8 high flush draw and a gut shot to the end of the straight. So I don't really want to be continuation betting that into 2 people. The reason for that is if I get flatted and I make my hand on the turn, it puts me in a very awkward spot, and I don't quite know what I'm going to do. If I miss, it puts me in an awkward spot where I pretty much have to barrel, but I'm just going to get raised in a lot of the time by a better draw. I'm going to be in really bad shape when I do get it in, and yeah, it's not the kind of spot where I want to barrel off with this weaker draw. When the ace comes down, I think we can represent. I think we can represent, to a player that doesn't play very often, I think we can represent aces that didn't bet the flop, was scared to bet the flop, bare aces. I think to the more observant player that's played with me a lot, they'll know that I would almost never check aces on that flop. I would almost always continuation bet aces on that flop. But I haven't played with these two too much, so I don't expect them to be thinking along those sorts of lines. It's easy for us to rep ace 10 as well, of just a 10 that didn't bet the flop. So I think having raised out of the small blind, I want to represent this ace, and we've got outs, we've called, and we can barrel off a lot of rivers if the draws miss, and we can check call or check fold depending on what happens. Then the action goes J-max raises or I-max raises, and it's flat called by this guy who I've never seen before. So what do we put this guy on? I pretty much always put this guy on a draw. I don't expect him to flat ace 10 there. I rarely expect him to flat ace 9 there. I think he has a draw the majority of the time. So it's not going to be profitable for us to call this 58, even though we're getting really good odds, because we're not going to know where we are. We're out of position on the river. We don't know if our flush is going to be good. We don't know if a 7 is going to be good for us. So yeah, it's never going to be a good idea to call here, and I just have to let it go. And we have to be aware now of the sort of image that we've fostered on the top right hand table here. Table 1 and table 3, sorry, those are obvious raises. I would almost always raise aces out of the big blind if there was limpers to me. I wouldn't raise maybe the weakest of weakest aces, but most aces, certainly an ace with a king and suited ace is certainly good enough to be raising. When this flop comes down, there's 2 Broadway cards out, which actually isn't a great flop for aces, because it means that a lot of hands that have a pair are also going to have a straight draw to go with them, and we're not in great shape against that. But I mean, I think a continuation bet is mandatory here. We've got the backdoor diamonds. We've got the king as a blocker to a set of kings, and they're both quite short stacked. So it's not like we're committed to calling any of their raises if they were to go all in. And if you look at this, it's now 125 more for us to win 375 or $380 pot. We're 33% or somewhere around that sort of region against 2 pair, which is he's most likely holding, but he could also have a pair and a straight draw, which we're sort of 40% against. Basically, once we bet there, we can never fold against these stacks. And I think if you're not betting that flop and just check folding that flop, then you're playing too weak. So we make our hand, which is nice. And when you're playing quite an aggressive style here on table 3, it's possible I could have bet the flop and tried to represent the ace high flush if it came in, barrel off a lot of turn cards, because it's hard for him to be very strong when we get called there. But in a pot with 4 people, I really don't like to mess around in multi-way pots when there's more than 3 people in, because especially against people who I'm unsure of their range. And that was actually a really good call, it looked, by Morris there. Go back to that, he managed to call that on the river after Scuba Joe bet there. He must have been observing that Scuba Joe has been making a lot of bets when there's been checks around, so he must be looking to steal pots. I mean, I don't know if he's betting for value there. I don't really know what level he's thinking on. Obviously if he's betting that for value, then he's pretty bad. But it seems to be a really good call by Marissa. On the top left, I usually don't like to limp in the small blind, but this short stack kind of seemed quite passive. So I didn't mind limping there. I bet the flop just to try and take it down. When I got called, I shut down, and then I had a showdown river on the value. Didn't want to bluff the turn or the river. I'm happy when I've got a lot of showdown value, or even just a little bit of showdown value to check my hand down. I think it's an important concept, and something maybe that people don't do enough is when you have showdown value, it's fine to just check down your hand if you don't think you're getting called by worse, but you have the best hand a lot of the time. You just want to get to showdown, and if you're doing this as well, it does good things for your image. If you're seen that you're not betting marginal hands, what you're doing is you're polarizing your range between good made hands and bluffs. Table 1 here. I think here we go. I'll bring up the stats here so we can see Sir Mathers. He is raising. Well, we don't have enough stats on him yet, but he seems to be raising 50% of his hands from mid position. So we'd imagine that he's raising a lot of hands from early position. Doesn't look like the kind of player who's only going to be raising aces from under the gun, basically. And this is just a 3-bet for value. We get called by Vampire 46, but I mean, we're not too worried about that. The flop comes 10-7-5, and we are about 150 big blinds deep, and it's kind of a gross spot if I bet the flop here and he check raises. I would probably pitch it because I don't know how light he's going to be playing back at me. But our hand, again, has a lot of showdown value, and I expect to get check raised a lot on this board that's sort of fairly connected. There's a lot of straight draws and just naked tens that could be check raising me there. I want to preserve the value of my hand, so I'm happy to check behind the flop against this player who seems like he might be a bit aggressive, a bit splashy. So we get a good turn card in the 5. I mean, if he had 10-7 or just a 10, then we're doing well. We're doing better against his range now. So now I'm happy to bet the turn as a delay continuation bet. Bet 75. It's about 3/4 of the pot. There's no need, I think, to be betting full pot here, because all we're doing is just blasting out the hands that he could possibly call us with that would be worse. And if we get check raise, then we're just losing more money, because I don't think we can call a check raise in this spot. It's just not necessary to bet the full pot here. So what actually happens is we do get this sort of small check raise, which, I mean, the smaller check raises to me often look very bluffy, but I haven't played much with him, and I tend to give people respect until they give me reason not to, and I think that's usually the best way to go about things. If you go around never giving people respect, then you're going to get yourself into trouble. At some point, you need people to give you a reason not to give them respect first, and you can see we got check raised off the best hand there. I don't know what he's trying to achieve there. I don't know whether he's bluffing or doing that for value. It's a protected pot as well. I'm just really not sure what he's doing there. It's completely pointless, seeming as he has to win off this guy anyway, and it's pretty clear that I've got an overpair there a lot of the time, and it's pretty clear that I'm not going to be wanting to fold that overpair a lot of the time in his eyes. But he should know that, so yeah, I mean, I don't know, I think it's a pretty bad play, but it works out for him. And now I would certainly be looking to target this guy as being over-aggressive, just sort of mindlessly aggressive, almost in spots. And we're going to be looking for 3-bet for value against his range. An obvious 4-bet with aces on table 2. As long as you can get about a third of your stack in pre-flop with aces, then you're doing fine, basically. If you get a third of your stack in pre-flop, then you're basically just blindly potting any flop that isn't absolutely horrendous for your hand. So that's the situation that you want to have. You want to have one pot size bet left on the flop, and that works multi-way as well. So if you can't get a third of your stack in, but the stack sizes are such that you can put a pot size bet on the flop against multiple people and get all in, that's fine as well. But that's the situation that you want with aces, is to have one pot size bet left, and that's an unexploitable way of playing aces. And it's high variance in that a lot of the time you will get called by a pair, and the pair will be getting odds to do so, but you have to remember that that hand has put a lot of money in pre-flop as a dog to your aces to get to that point. So you're making money. You're basically making them put in lots of money with the worst hand, and then they're putting money in as a dog. And the only reason they're doing that in the first place is because they have a lot of money in pre-flop, and they are then pot stuck and have to do it. But you're making money doing this. But it's one of the reasons why Omaha can be very, very swingy, because it's the right play to get your stack in there, but that you can get your stack in a lot on aggressive tables where there's a lot of free betting, a lot of four betting, and the variance in Omaha can get pretty sort of stomach churning. I know in a 450,000 hand sample, I've had 250 buy-in, 160 buy-in, and 170 buy-in downswing, and there was definitely tilt involved in these downswings, but I think that's it's almost an unavoidable part of the game. I think you'll be hard pushed to find a poker player who says they don't go on tilt, but all I'm saying basically is that the variance is fairly horrendously stomach churning, but it is the right play to try and get a third of your stack in pre-flop, or enough so that you can bet one pot size bet on the flop, and that's what we can do on this flop. But I end up checking behind on table 2, and the reason for this is that Morris is a regular, and I probably wouldn't if I had bare aces, just without a king or something else to back it up, sort of a backdoor flush draw or something like that. There are some aces that I wouldn't put all in on this flop, and so I would therefore be checking behind this flop with the intention to folding aces after 4-betting. Morris should know this, so I'm just expecting to get a bet out of his entire range on the turn, which is going to be, I mean, if he has a straight or 2-pair, the money's going in anyway. If he basically has any semblance of a hand, the money is going in anyway. But sometimes he will have completely missed the flop here, and he will bet the turn with his absolute air. So in that case, it's going to be more profitable for me to wait, check behind the turn, and then shove all in over his bet, or just call his all in on the turn. Sometimes even he would have picked up a queen, and he would have got the queen in on the flop anyway. But that's my reason for checking the flop there. Basically, it's not a play that I'd recommend against anyone, basically, apart from someone who you play with regularly and you want to mix up your play. Sometimes it's a good time to mix it up, because you're never folding. It doesn't matter what turn card's coming, you're never folding, because you never would be folding. But you're just, because Morris is a player who likes to pick up on weakness. He's a good aggressive player. I expect him to bet his entire range on the turn here. So I get some bets off him that I wouldn't have got off him on the flop. And just to mix up my play. So that's the reason for me checking behind the flop there. But it's not something I would do regularly. Table 4, we have an open-ender, but we've got 2 people left to act, who could be waiting to check raise, so we can't call that. And the reason I shove on 2 is just in case he has something like that's he's getting odds for that small bet. We want to make him pay if he has some sort of weak draw. And I would imagine that he had air there for him to fold there. Table 1, I'd usually raise that on the button, but against 2 short stacks you have to be a bit careful and tighten up your range. So I wouldn't be betting that. On table 3, we flop a nice little low wrap and 2 backdoor flush draws. And you should remember in Omaha never to discount your backdoor flush draws. The backdoor flush draw is worth an extra 1.5 outs on the flop. So you never want to discount it. It's worth a lot of extra equity, and a lot of the times it can be, in close decisions, it can be the turning point between getting it in and folding. So never discount your backdoor flush draws. And so with a little wrap and I got 2 backdoor flush draws, it's an easy bet. I can easily call if I get raised. With a lot of really good turn cards that come for me. On table 4, I'd check behind just the small flush on the flop, because I'm never getting 2 streets of value. and I don't think I get any value on the river, so that's why I don't bet the river. On table 1, it goes limp on the button, and Sir Mathers raises it up from the small blind. We've got a pretty strong hand. The Queen Jack 10 6 double suited. The 6 is a bit of a dangler, but the overall hand is very strong, and it plays really well to a 3-bet, and it seems Sir Mathers seems to be raising a lot of hands, so I want to be 3-betting that hand from the big blind, try and get the button out and try and get it heads up with Sir Mathers, because our hand's going to play better that way. Again, I check back the flop for pot control. This is the problem against playing against an aggressive player, is that you can't just be blindly firing flops. So I check behind for pot control. On table 3, I called in the small blind with from a button raise with ace 9 jack 7 to the suited to the ace. We get a continuation bet on this dry flop, and I think it's just the perfect flop to check raise bluff occasionally, because it's hard for an overpair to call. There's not very many hands he can call with, and yeah, basically he's going to have high cards a lot of the time there. He's going to have an overpair which is hard push to call, and he just doesn't. Yeah, it's a hard flop to hit hard, basically, with the kind of hands he'll be raising. So yeah, I think that's a nice spot to bluff raise. Table 2, that's a 3-bet for value against Morris, who raises a lot of hands. On the flop, I sort of go to continuation bet, but chicken out here, and oh no, I don't chicken out. I do continuation bet. I think that's a fine sort of bet sizing for this sort of flop. You don't need to be betting too much. There's no reason to be betting a lot, because he either has a hand which has connected with that sort of flop, or he hasn't. And as long as you're making the same bet when you do have the goods, then it's fine to continuation bet smaller there. And this is what it is. I chicken out of a double barrel on the turn and river. I don't think that's a bad spot to triple barrel at all. Assuming as we do with the ace of hearts, it's going to be very difficult for him to call. He may well call the turn with a straight, but I don't think he's calling the river with a straight, and he's going to be hard pushed to call the river with a decent flush, although he probably gives me very little respect. And I don't know why he didn't 4-bet there. I would 4-bet that hand, but he takes it down anyway. That possibly could be a missed opportunity for a triple barrel there. I don't mind a triple barrel there at all. Sometimes maybe a double barrel would be better if you know that you've got a really bad image at the table and don't think you can get credit for the ace-5 flush there. But yeah, that could have been a missed opportunity. Table 3, Morris is going to be 3-betting us quite wide on the button, and I don't mind sort of making a small 4-bet here, because what it does is it takes the initiative away from him, and it means that we'll take down a lot of ace-high flops. It means that we will be able to rep aces on something like a 4-4 deuce flop, or a lot of dry flops like that, where we can get away with stealing the flop, just representing these phantom aces. We flop a flush, and I'm going to let him continuation bet here, because he will continuation bet most of his range here, a lot of air. If we lead out, we're not going to get value from, and then I want to raise up the flop for the times that he does have trip aces, because I don't think he's folding them, and I want to get value out of them, so I want to raise the flop. I'd also be occasionally bluff raising there, maybe not in that exact spot because he hasn't been 3-betting us a lot at this table, but it's basically just a raise for value there. I'm never really folding any flush in a 3-bet pot, or very rarely folding a flush in a 3-bet pot. It's the stack size to pot ratio just gets so small that I think you're going to be making mistakes if you're folding flushes regularly there. On table 2, I like to make this small raise to 2.5 big blinds on the when I'm raising under the gun with sort of a speculative-ish hand. Because it just means that when I get 3-bet with this hand, I really want to play it, but if I've raised a full pot, then the stacks are going to be much smaller compared to the pot, and it makes my hand much less profitable to play, if at all profitable. So I want to be making smaller raises with this, which means that the 3-bets are going to be smaller, which means I'm getting better odds to call, which means I'm getting better implied odds, and basically makes my hand a lot more profitable to play. And it's something I've only started doing recently, but I really find that it's working out for me. These smaller pre-flop raises, and it goes for times also when you're raising into small stacks in the big blinds, which are passive, so they're only going to be raising you with good hands. But you want to save money for the times that you do get raised off your hand, so you're making these small bets just to save yourself money. And it might not seem like a lot just to save yourself like a couple of dollars when you do have to fold, but those sorts of things can add up. They will add up to your win rate over the long run. And although you might not think when you get 3-bet, when you've made it $10, when you could have made it 14, that makes that much difference. But if you scale it up, then it means that it's sort of, the pot might only be another $8 bigger on the flop, but it means the continuation bet is another $8, so that if you call that, you've then made the pot $24 bigger by the turn, and then the pot's going to be $48 bigger by the river. So it really does have a big effect because of the way that it works with it being a cumulative effect over the streets. A 3-bet kings for value on table 4, and it's kind of an okay spot to slow play. It'll be much better in position, but yeah, it's not a bad spot to slow play, because when you check here, most people are not going to be betting because you've repped a strong hand. It comes down a very dry board. When you check, they're gonna immediately sense danger, but I don't think this guy seems to be thinking on that level, so I think it's okay to check here to try and induce a bet. When it does get checked down, I consider checking again, just hoping that it looks like I've given up now. But I don't like to go on feel too much, but he did check behind the flop very, very quickly, which to me is usually a sign of a hand that wants to get to showdown, sort of isn't interested, So I don't want him to have picked up extra turn. I just don't want him to have picked up extra outs there. I don't. It's kind of risky. You have to know your player really, really well if you're going to check twice there to elicit a bet. So I decided not to this time. On table 1, I don't like to continuation bet these sorts of 10-jack flops. Because I feel like there's a load of hands you can get called with, especially by looser players who will be chasing all sorts of draws, and it's difficult to know which they're going to have. They're going to be bluffing other draws that don't come in. It just makes your life very, very, very annoying. So I don't like to continuation bet those flops, and my continuation bet percentage has actually come down a lot. I think it's probably the better way to go, but I'll just say if you do bring your continuation bet percentage down, then you need to be contesting more pots on the turn and the river. You need to be looking for spots where you can represent big hands. You need to be occasionally checking behind marginal hands so that people can't just relentlessly bet the turn against you and take the pot down. You need to be occasionally checking down strong hands. So that you need to merge your range, but not too much, just very occasionally, like the sort of thing that we did against Morris earlier. Just very occasionally to merge your range. Bottom right, obviously, we're just betting for value here. The bet sizing on the turn, I bet about 33 on the turn there. because I want to get called by a straight in that spot when the straight and the flush comes in. I don't want to bet too big there, but once he calls, I don't think he's calling another bet with the straight unless it's very, very small. And I think if he has a flush, he's very unlikely to fold it. So I want to bet big, basically, to get maximum value. So that's why I bet sort of just under the pot on the turn, and then I'm betting big on the river, because I just want value out of whatever flush he might have. So table 1, we pick up ace, jack, 9, 10 with hearts, and the loose player raises it up in the cutoff against an under the gun limper. It's not a bad spot to 3-bet and try and isolate there, but my hand plays well in a multi-way pot, so I don't mind just calling and inviting more people in. But the short stack actually ends up going in, and this guy ends up shoving, and we can't call that. I mean, he's going to have aces here a lot, and we don't have the type of hand that we can try and snap off aces with. So it's not going to be profitable for us to call there. On table 3, it's usually a spot in which I continuation bet a lot, but with the short stack player, it might not be the greatest, as he's probably shoving any ace there. Bear with me a sec. Okay, so I just wanted to try and find an interesting hand, just to finish off the session. There's a bit of a lull in the action. On table 1, we get a raise under the gun from this monkey man, who's been raising a lot of hands. So the 3-bet that I make here isn't really quite for value. It's more just that this guy is raising a lot of hands, which suggests to me that he's going to be raising lots of gappy rundowns, which means that he's going to be drawing to a lot of non-nut straights on the flop. And it just means that our hand is so good structurally that a lot of the straight draws that we flop and a lot of the wraps that we flop are just going to dominate any wraps that he flops. So, I mean, it is for value in that sense, but it's our hand is very, very strong, but it's not a favourite over a lot of hands, over a lot of sort of big pair hands. But it's basically just to build a big pot in position with these two players who are playing too many hands with a hand that rates to be more structurally sound than theirs. So that is the reason for the 3-bet. We're hoping really for 2 callers, and we don't want anyone to fold. We're perfectly happy if someone comes over the top. We flop a wrap here, and even if he does have a set, we're doing extremely well against a set. I think it's somewhere in the region of 45%, somewhere around there. So yeah, we're doing really, really well here. Table 2, that's just betting the blockers. We're in the big blind there. So what we want to, the bet here is designed basically we want to block out any other big bigger straight draws that could be around. So that we want to block out the 10 jacks. And the jack kings and those sorts of things. We want those out, so we want to make a big bet, try and block those out. A big thing to look out for in Omaha is when you've got a pair to go with your hand, to go with your wrap, it can add a serious amount of equity to your hand, and it can often make the difference between a call or a fold in close situations. So our hand is made so much stronger here by the fact that even if he does have a queen with a wrap here, or even there's no hand he can have here basically which has us in bad shape. The worst shape we can be in is when we're up against a set, and even then we've got a load of outs. So yeah, what I was just trying to say was that if there was a flush draw out, it might be a different situation, but with no flush draw out, we're basically flipping against a set. And I was trying to say not necessarily in this situation, but in different situations, having a pair can really, really help your equity. And a lot of the times when you flop a nice wrap in position, and you've got 2 checks due and you're in a 3-bet pot, a lot of the time it's good for you to take a free card if you don't have a pair to go with you. But if you've got a pair to go with you, you really want to be getting the money in on the flop, because there's no hands which have you in bad shape. So you really want to push your fold equity as much as possible. And we actually do get it in against top set here, and I'll go through the session actually in Hold'em Manager. Let me just pull that up and see if we can run the calculations and see what that's like, and we can analyze the session as well. Okay, so this is the hand. As I said, a lot of the hands he's going to be raising with, he's going to have the equity advantage pre-flop, but with 100 big blind stats and my smaller 3-bet gives me more room to play post-flop. And he's going to be raising a lot of hands that are really gappy, like sort of Queen 10, 7, 5 or something like that, which he's just going to flop basically the arse end of the hand every single time, and we're always going to have the better draws. So yeah, that I'm happy with the 3-bet. We get like the worst possible situation in that we're up against top set, but well, I guess at least he didn't come along with a higher wrap. But yeah, even against top set, you can see we're still 47%, and we have to bet this flop because we really want to force out. We don't want to give free cards. You want to push your fold equity. You want to force out the 10-jack sort of hands. So yeah, there'll be more of this play in the next video. But I hope you like this video. Post anything on the forum that you think could be done better, because obviously I've only just this is my first video that I've made, so let me know if I'm not clear on any spots. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I'm happy to answer any sort of things I've said in the video which you don't understand, or things that I've not said clearly, or maybe things that I've said that you just think are a load of rubbish. Just let me know. I'll work with you to try and make these videos as good as possible, and we'll finish off this session in the next video that I make at 2-4, and at the end of that session we'll look at what stats I was playing, we'll go over the big hands and review the session. So this is DragTheBar 101 for PokerSwap, signing out.